session that we have on Saturday at 4, this exact same time, we'll have a chance to go back and listen to the session. And that being said, if you know of somebody who would be keen to hear this talk and was not able to attend today, but might be able to attend on Saturday, then by all means, feel free to share the details. So before I hand it over to the speaker, yeah, there's also a schedule of the upcoming sessions and the different topics that we're going to cover. We're kind of booking them in as we go. So we've got a few sessions already locked in terms of the guest speakers, but not all of them. But you can take a look at the link to the schedule, which if you don't have it already, Sens will drop that into the chat box as well. And we'll constantly update that with the different speakers that we have over the coming weeks and different notes about the talks that they plan to cover. But yeah, so I would now like to hand it over to our speaker today. We have Catherine Delahunty, who we're excited to have. She's involved with Coromandel Watchdog, who are a group that have worked to protect the Coromandel from gold mining since the 70s. And Catherine's going to talk to us about her experience with successful campaigning. She's also long time been involved with Greenpeace, having been a member of staff in the past, and is now on the board. So her views are her own, and we're really excited to have her today. And thank you so much, Catherine. We really value you coming to share your time and experience. So with no further ado, I'll hand it over to you.
Oh, kia ora. Thank you very much, Abigail and Sentil. Thank you so much for setting this up. Nā mihi nui ki te tangata whenua o Hauraki, me mihi nui ki te tangata whenua o te motu kātau tēnā rā koutou, tanga te tiriti katoa tēnā koutou. Just acknowledging that I'm in Hauraki in the Coromandel here in the Koiranga Valley, and I'm in the people of Hauraki's waka. Just thank you so much, Greenpeace. This is a chance for us all to think about change, because we're in a time of rapid change. And I just want to also mihi to those people who are out on the front lines, the iwi roadblockers, the medical people, the people feeding people who have no kai, because not all of us are, you know, comfortably at home doing yoga and making sourdough. You know, it isn't like that for everybody. And I recognize my privilege and I want to own it. So activism to me is a duty of people of privilege, because we can, we should, and we will, and we need to maintain our accountability in terms of how. So there's another session on Saturday, and I got probably cannot promise you I'll say the same things, because that's not how I roll. I just kind of am a storyteller. And normally a participatory educator. So normally if we were doing this together, we'd be in a role play by now, or singing, you know, we'd be doing something kind of wild. But instead, what I'm going to do is try and just lay out a few ideas, and then we're going to have a chance to respond to questions that will come up through the Q&A or the chat. So I'm hoping to do my best. And I'm just really acknowledging that I see people from all over the motu here today. Thank you for your time, especially for the parents. You know, it's not easy when the small people are at home all the time and they need action too. Parenting can be very activist. So just to kick it off, the topic I was given was successful activism. Like, what's my experience of that? I guess my experience of social change, environmental justice work is without activism, nothing really happens. But it isn't a thing that can happen in isolation. And we have to really unpack those two concepts. Like, what is success and what is activism? Again, that depends on your goals and your starting point. So success, it's a funny word. If you're talking about the oil industry or the gold mining industry or inequality or colonization, these are long-term, profound systems which we are all entwined with, for better and often for worse. And to change them is a long-term project. And so organizations and hapu and iwi and tangata whenua groups and communities who want fundamental transformation, it's quite an exciting time for us to be talking about it, but it's also a scary time because There's a lot of momentum behind business as usual. And so if we're going to campaign for change as activists, we have that some of us have that big picture with us all the time. Is what we're doing working towards fundamental change, or is it just something that tweaks the system, makes us feel good, maintains the status quo while appearing to make change? You know, those are all questions we have to ask ourselves. So the essence to me is basically a thing called praxis, action, reflection. Without action, we get nowhere. Without reflection, action is pointless. We need to do both. And in that praxis, we start to have a plan for the system change that has to happen. Because, you know, like getting rid of plastic bags is great, but it ain't system change. You know, let's be honest. You know, blocking the road, which I've done many times against a mining company, it ain't system change. I'm not saying those things aren't worth doing, but they have to be done within a context. Success depends on what you're looking for, what your goals are. Activism as well as a word, very interesting word, because, you know, there's a real elitism around activism. Oh, how many times have you been arrested? Like, you know, you get kudos in some societies circles for the more times you're arrested. Or how many times did you chain yourself to that thing? You know, are you one of the climbers that got on the media? Like, there's a lot of hierarchy around activism. And actually, activism is courage in the face of oppression, and is actually about a whole range of things we do. So, for example, one day, a number of years ago, my partner, who worked for Greenpeace like I did for a long time, walked into the office after we'd left. This was probably 15 years ago. And in the sort of reception area for the campaign teams, this guy that worked there put up a semi-nude, degrading photograph of a woman. And a lot of the women were really upset, and they came to me in Gordon, because we were like old staff members as well as being kind of older people, and said, oh, we're really upset. And my partner, Gordon, just walked over to that picture and ripped it off the wall. And he said to them, this is a direct action organisation. And that's activism as much as hanging off an oil rig. Ripping down a degrading photograph and challenging patriarchal oppression of women in the workplace is activism. So activism has many facets and faces, and it does require us to reflect on our own practice, our own behaviour, as well as the external world that we're trying to change. So, you know, that's one example of what I see as direct action. And activism, to me, is contextual. So, Ihumato, for example, where I've spent quite a bit of time, they're occupying, but they're also not occupying because it's their land anyway. So they're a noho, they're at home, and yet they're at home because it's generated such enormous support, has resulted in government being forced to address that issue, and Fletcher's basically being forced to give up. And we don't know the outcome of that yet, but you can see the power of sitting still and staying in a place and telling people to come to you. That is activism. It isn't always about the time that I chained myself to a whaling ship in Timaru Harbour, and you know, after pretending that I was the girlfriend of the Filipino crewman. I mean, there's the whole story with that. And I'm going to tell some stories, but I just wanted to make it clear that success and activism are framework words. And it's about being really clear and really analytical sometimes about what we're really doing. I'll give you an example of pointless activism, which was very well intentioned. I'm very involved in the Free West Papua campaign, and at one stage another group that I haven't worked with, but all good people and great intentions, out of the blue, without anything kind of necessarily surrounding it, went and hung a banner over a bridge near the motorway that said Free West Papua. And one of our very experienced crew who was with them said it just felt like, you know, good on you, but what's the context here? Who is going to drive past in their car and understand this if there's no story that's following up in the media, there's no social media campaign to support it. It's just random, but we feel good that we've done something, because sometimes we feel so angry, we just want to do something, right? We just want to go out there and do something. And all this talking and all this like negotiating submissions and writing things and social media can feel really pointless. We want to act, but acting without reflection results in a waste of energy and actually undermines the ability to make change. So we have to think, what is the thing we need to do, the active thing at this moment, and what's the context? So it is quite an analytical process. I actually forgot to talk about my background. I don't really know that, you know, you can Google me. I was an MP for 9 years. I hate Parliament. You know, like I've been an activist since I ran a high schools union when I was 15. This is just my life. And I don't think it's uniquely significant. And I'm out there, you know, if you want to read anything that I've written or done, you know, it's all out there. But I am at 66 and a grandmother still as activist as I ever was, because I know that there's this thing people call the amoeba, and it's about change. And if you don't have anyone being a radical activist, then people who are just writing about causes look radical. And people who, if there's no one writing about the cause, the radical activist looks pointless. So we need to work as translators of each other's activism. We need to be clear about what we're doing. And this amoeba model says you don't get change if everybody just does one thing, or, as happens more often on the progressive movements and the environment movement, if we all attack each other for not doing the same thing. So if I had a whiteboard, I'd draw you the amoeba and I'd show you that radical activism relies on translation, i.e. media stories, social media, informed comment, but also informed comment changes nothing without the radical action. So those things are all interconnected, and that's enough of that. What I want to talk about today really is activism as a tactic, and it's a diverse tactic. It's basically about putting ourselves on some kind of line. If there isn't that element of putting yourself on some kind of line, then you're not radical, and radical means the root of the matter. That's what the word radical actually means, going to the root of the matter. So often the most effective activism is when we go to the root of the matter and put ourselves on a line. And sometimes it's not going to be none of these actions are the ultimate transformation of the systems that we need to destroy, patriarchy, capitalism, colonization. Like, it's not going to happen by lunchtime. But if we can see how that action moves us closer to the goals of complete transformation, then we can feel that we're making a contribution to that genuine change. And it's also, what do we bring with us? What analysis do we bring with us to our activism? I've got a million stories, but we've got to be clear whether your success is, sometimes your success might be just an action that built group strength. It built solidarity, it built movement. It might not necessarily have done a huge public shift. And sometimes it's a huge public shift. And I think it's important to think about, in a long campaign, and this one that I've been involved with in Hauraki has been going on for 40 years, which is nothing like a treaty struggle. You know, that tangata whenua have been fighting, you know, one issue, say the awa, Whanganui awa, was a 125-year campaign. So that's a bit different, isn't it, from like, oh, I'm tired because I've been fighting for, you know, get rid of plastic bags and it's taken me 2 years of my life. We need to put into perspective the activism of the colonized versus the privileged. They're quite different, and they require quite different things. And privileged activism is well resourced, but activism against major and multiply faceted oppression is a different issue. And you know, there are many people from Annex Sykes to Moana Jackson who can talk to you about that, and we need to listen to them. So success can be building awareness, changing a law, it can be building solidarity, it can be completely clearly just about what's the step we need to take to move us to the next place. And solidarity inside those things is very important. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit, as time flies, about the 40-year campaign that I've been involved with. And it's a group called Coromandel Watchdog of Hauraki. And we're a group of people who have been resisting multinational mining companies for a very long time. And when you're working at this level in your own land, in your own community, and when your own homes are threatened, it actually builds a different kind of creativity and resilience than if you see something on social media and decide, oh, I'm interested in that, I'd like to support it. So some of the stories I'd like to tell you are just to show you that creativity and diversity and humor and solidarity and Te Tiriti awareness, all of those things have to be understood, maintained and examined, and we can achieve a lot. Like, we're still fighting against the gold mining industry, but they have not managed to turn the most of the Hauraki waka into a mine, and they've been trying in this wave since the 1970s, and we've succeeded in holding that ground through activism, education, lobbying, negotiation, law changes, and the full range of tools available to campaigns. But without the direct action component, and I'm a great believer in it, without that direct confrontation with power, confronting the mining industry, we, one, we don't understand our enemy, and two, we do not get the media to understand we're serious, nor do we become serious ourselves. We actually cannot rely on anyone else to do this for us. We have to do it ourselves. So just a couple of things that I think have been interesting to be part of. It's really about taking responsibility. So, for example, one day, mining companies used to have the right to go onto anyone's land without their consent. One day we found this mining guy, this geologist, had gone onto our land to collect samples. Now, collecting samples sounds very minor, but if you know anything about mining, terrible pun, it's actually the starting point for the end. And if we can resist at the start, I always say, and it sounds a bit like one of the Jacinda lockdown speeches, go hard, go early. And so the kind of activism that I think has been successful for us is going hard and going early. So, for example, when this person went onto these people's land to collect the samples, when we realized that he was there, we surrounded his car with other cars, and then he came back, put his samples from their land into his car, went off to get the police. And we broke into the car and we took out the samples and we replaced them with rock cakes. So we took his rocks, which were actually our rocks from our land, and gave him some rock cakes. And he came back and he was like mega upset. And he was like, oh, you know, I've called the police. And we're like, well, fair enough, you can go now. So he drives off down the road, looks over his shoulder and realizes the bag's there still, but it looks funny. So he has a look in and he realizes it's full of rock cakes instead of rocks. And then he gets in a rage and says, okay, well, why didn't you call Coromandel Watchdog? And we were like, well, hey, mate, we are. And it was that point he realized, and he didn't stick around, and his company, they realized that they were going to be consistently challenged in a real way. And so I draw a line at violence. I'm very against physical violence towards people. That's why I'm associated with groups committed to non-violence. Absolutely. But actually, I think taking someone's rocks out of their car and putting rock cakes in, you know, I'm not interested I'm not interested in apologizing for that. Another situation we're in where a company, and this could happen anywhere in the Motu, set up a public event for people to come in, and they were going to tell them why they should mine the whole of the coast between Tauranga and the Mercury Islands. And they had a beautiful display of how seabed mining, which as we know has just been defeated, hopefully forever, by a wonderful effort. They had all these diagrams and all the rest of it. And so there was about 50 people in the room plus the company. And, you know, meetings aren't normally necessarily an activist space, but it depends on how you approach it. If you approach a meeting as a place where you're going to have a dialogue, it's quite different from if you go, this is an opportunity to drive this company out of this community non-violently and forever. And we chose the second option. We decided there was no point in talking to these people. We just needed them to know that real community power would be exercised. So as a facilitator, I facilitated a conversation where every single person in the room got to tell them what they thought of them. So they had 45 people saying from different voices. We had tangata whenua leaders, we had young people, we had old people, we had the whole range of us all saying, nah, this is not going to happen. We're not going to put up with it, and this is not what's going to happen. And then, like, my contribution was to tear all the pictures down off the walls and put them on the floor and say, that's it, we're not doing this. And then by the time we'd finished with them, they were kind of like, okay, well, they didn't know what to do. So then we presented them with some 3-day-old rotten fish as a gift because, you know, actually our oceans are at stake here, and if you want to come into our community, here's a rotten fish, mate. And then when we were in the meeting, while we were outside in the meeting, someone, wasn't me, slashed their tires, and it was a weekend, so they couldn't actually leave town, but they never ever came back, because day one of their attempt to get the community on side, we dealt to them good. We told them straight, and that is what it's about. Start early, start hard, be non-violent, but take your power and hold on to it. And it's difficult because one woman in the meeting she suddenly said to me, "Oh, you're not being nice to them." And I had to kind of go like, whoo, because nice ain't what we're here for. Truth is what we're here for. Courage is what we're here for. And staunchness, and we don't have to be rude and horrible. No one was. But we weren't being nice, and that pushed someone's buttons who, you know, if you feel like it's got to be nice, then you need to choose where you want to stand. And there's a place for people who don't want to be in confrontation because it makes them feel uncomfortable. But actually, in activism, a non-violent, well-prepared, respectful confrontation is a beauty to behold. It is actually a wonderful thing, especially when it's community-based and that people are just asserting this because of love. And sometimes love can be tough love, and you can give them a rotten fish. So that's the kind of stuff that we found worked quite well. I guess I've participated in many kind of staunch and loving models of social justice, but I guess the stuff that's happened at home is the stuff I really love. Like, for example, in the valley where I live, I just want to acknowledge my late and wonderful friend Jeanette Fitzsimons. So Jeanette Fitzsimons lived, I still can't really believe she's gone. She's still here, lived down the road from me. And once the mining companies decided that they were going to start mining in our valley, and we found this out by monitoring, like keeping people on the side of the road for like day and night till we actually worked out which their vehicles were, and we found them and we blocked them. And we physically blocked them, and then we finally escorted them out of the valley, and they didn't come back that way either. And the thing is, eternal vigilance and direct action. They said that they'd been intimidated by some terrible old women, and I think that was me and Jeanette. And if anyone knows Jeanette, intimidation wasn't one of her tactics. Me, I get a bit Irish, but she's not like that. She's a very, very, she isn't, even though she is gone, she's still with us with her dignity and serenity. But that was an effective action as well. And I think it didn't mean that no more mining was going to happen on the Coromandel. We're always looking for silver bullets that shift that. But one of the ways in which bigger groups can help was what happened after that in 2010, when Greenpeace and Steve Abel organised the massive anti-mining march against national parks and Schedule 4 lands in Queen Street. And so for us as a small organisation living in a rural area to come up to that march, we could never have organised that ourselves. But what we saw was the organisational role of activism can be a massive game changer, and governments have been too scared to actually suggest mining in national parks again, although they're still bloody well. Anyway, I won't even talk to you about what they're doing, because that's not what this is about. So, but that showed that particular rally was an amazing touchstone, and it showed you that people were prepared to be active. They would, many people who wouldn't normally go on any form of demonstration put themselves in the street that day because of the mythological power of love of country. And that's a dangerous thing as well, because, you know, patriotism is the last refuge of Donald Trump. But it's actually really important sometimes to get those numbers. And so numbers, flexibility, creativity, and resilience are really important. Like you can, you just need to be conscious about what you're doing and why you're doing it. Before I go to questions, because I can see, I don't know if there are any questions, but hopefully, or comments. I just want to quickly talk about for example, the chasm situation, Ngāti Runui Chasm Greenpeace, that have stopped seabed mining. And there you see that activism is about an expression that I learned from an Indigenous activist, which was the quality of our campaign or project depends on the quality of our relationships. And so it's the quality of our relationships, not having a blueprint, knowing your strategy, knowing everything. Those are not the key things. The key things for a sustainable activist campaign that works for longer term change is the quality of relationships that we build. That's absolutely fundamental. And so if Ngāti Runui felt they could work with Chasm and with Duncan Curry from Greenpeace and others, and everybody kicked in with what they had to give, those quality relationships resulted in a success. Now, the only reason that I'm still in some groups is because of the quality of the relationships that allow me to feel like we can do this. And so the amount of attention we pay to the quality of relationships while being creative, flexible, whatever, is vital. And I think the most important thing we can do as activists is not diss each other for doing things that we don't think is the best strategy, but to always engage so that we can build quality relationships for long-term change. So guys, is this the time for any questions? Because like listening to one person talking is just a little bit, you know, I could do an interpretive dance, but I think not.
Oh, we'd love to see that. Yeah, if people have questions, then go for it. If you throw them in the Q&A that Sense has opened, and then we can read them out to Catherine and she can answer them for you. So go for gold.
Oh, I see one about burnout team care. Yeah, and then there's another one about building broader issue-based. So let's kick in. Patrick's question about self-care and burnout and what do we do to look after teams. I'm kind of almost the wrong generation for self-care. It's like you people, younger people are better at this, let me be honest. One of the things that I struggle with in my culture is individualism. So we don't have, in Pākehā culture, we don't have, and in Pākehā environmentalism and activism, we don't have a good culture of kind of a spiritual and collective way of keeping ourselves strong. We don't. And I'm going to be really honest about that. And I think that puts a lot onto individuals to do it all themselves, to actually go, oh, well, you know, I'll need to look after myself, because basically the work's endless and no one can actually help me with it. And I think that's a real challenge for us. And I've done a lot of work through many, many years teaching Te Tiriti or Waitangi and working cross-culturally with other cultures. And I think Western culture, based on the English model, you know, we're really shit at this because of our inability to be collective, because our strength is our collectivity. That's when self-care works. People are better in good groups. It's when I feel alone that everything's up to me, and if I don't do this, if I don't drive myself like crazy, it won't happen, that I burn out. And I have burnt out. When I was younger, I got to a point where my blood was just running down my face. I don't know why, but my nose just kept bleeding. And it was a real lesson that actually I needed to, one, do Tai Chi, and two, start staying home sometimes. But it's like, I shouldn't have got to that point, but I didn't have any elders. I didn't have anyone saying to me, hey, you need a day off. You need to come on this walk where we actually together go to the places that we love and where we're trying to defend, and allow the bloody trees to give us their wisdom. I didn't have anyone doing that. So I just thought it was all up to me, which is a crock, because it's not. But I had to learn that the hard way. And I would hope, I don't want other people to learn it the hard way. I think collectively, honestly, our spirituality in Western culture is screwed. I don't mean religion, I mean spirituality. And that's a different kaupapa. And so I just think it makes us stuck on our heads, and, you know, all the kind of yoga in the world, like, you know, self-care, individual behavior, I don't think that's it. I think it's feeling like you've got a good group who's got your back, and that takes work. You know, that really does take work, and it's not the artificial work of just kind of like having, oh, you know, well, let's all get together and have a drink, you know, like, you know, that's the default position. Oh, well, we'll have a drink, you know. It's kind of like, yeah, well, we need to do that too. You know, we need to drink too, apparently. I'm not a drinker or a smoker, but I don't think we found it yet, that way to understand our place in relation to Papatūānuku, because we're colonists, and it's a fuck up. You know, Mum is saying so. So I think we actually have a lot of work to do in that space, and a lot of listening and learning from other cultures. How do other cultures sustain and strengthen their people, and not to appropriate, because that's the other great Western tactic, to appropriate, but it's a bloody good question. And I think it's the question we need to keep talking about. And also, I hope that none of you have to have a bleeding nose to realize that it's actually okay. I read a wonderful poem today by a woman called Mary Oliver, which starts off with the line, "You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk through the desert on your knees forever." So that's a good reminder for me, because I'm not good at this. Another question is, do you think our time is better spent building broad organisations or issue-based campaigns? Well, that's a great question, but it's not one I can say has a right answer, because it depends. So I'm not quite sure what you mean by broad organisations. Like, for example, there are organisations at a national level, like Forest and Bird and Greenpeace and others, who have a big reach and a large membership. And then there's like people who just work on specific stuff. And to me, again, it comes back to what I said before about what is the relationships between the broader, well-resourced organisations and the issue-specific campaigns. Like, what are those relationships, and what are we doing to make them healthy, so that we decide when we need to go after an issue, and we decide when we need to join a bigger group. Because I believe we need to do all of these things, and we just, for you, yourself, or us, it's about, there are times in life to do some things and times to do others. But I guess, having spent a lot of time in issue-based campaigning, the risk is that when you kind of win the issue, you think you've won the issue. And if the issue is really multinational capitalism, the fact that we stop mining somewhere, we ain't won the issue. We've just stopped a particular place from being destroyed. And so it's really, really easy to get caught up in the issue, and then the winnables. And it, you know, like, I'm just too old for winnables. I just don't, what I'm interested in is, how are we advancing fundamental change before it's too late? Like, we have this incredible meltdown on our planet. We have this incredible inequality. We have this horrible colonial racism that permeates most of our lives in ways that we don't recognize. And so how we do that, sometimes an issue is a great way to highlight the fundamental changes needed. So if you want to think about it like that, what does this issue highlight? You know, what does the foreshore and seabed, the Tukatime Moana was an issue that the right wing tried to use to say that we're all one people, and Maoris are trying to steal the beaches. And I went on that hikoi. It was a fantastic direct action moment with thousands and thousands and thousands of tangata whenua and like a handful of us Pākehā. And we travelled from the east coast where Gordon and I were living right down to Wellington. And part of that journey was that hikoi was broad-based. It couldn't have been broader, because it was the whakapapa. It was, everybody brought their whakapapa to the table. So every group, every rōpū, every hapu had their own waiata, their own particular way of presenting themselves with their costume, with when they finally got to Wellington, their whole way of processing things. But everyone had the common kaupapa. And so when you've had an experience like that, of seeing that solidarity, it's just life-changing. What I saw was leadership and care and nurturing and fundamental challenge that when push comes to shove, even though there's lots of things we don't agree on, we can, or they took that stand. And that was just so humbling to be part of and to watch. They took that stand, and the least we could do was show solidarity. So that was very broad, but also, you know, I also have met so many champions of specific issues, and really the conversation on specific issues needs to be, well, how does this connect to fundamental change? What is this really doing to move that forward without being a paralyzing question, if you know what I mean, without being something that makes people go, oh, well, it's not worth doing because it's too hard. If you bring a treaty analysis and a quality relationship analysis to the single issue of protecting a river, then you are making fundamental change, because that's not how we're used to operating in our society. Anybody got any other apartheid? Further thoughts about, wow, yeah, ones that exist forever. I'm just going to read Kyle's question. Thank you for this. You've spoken about further thoughts about what things we can control that make the difference between success and failure. Well, again, Kyle, it comes back to how you define success. So, I mean, we could look at the Hauraki campaign and say it's not successful because 40 years later we're still fighting mining companies. But it is successful because 40 years later we're still fighting. The gold's in our whenua, it won't go away, and gold has this mythical power. So to me, the success is that the community is still standing up and the community is still articulating an alternative vision, and we'll keep doing that. So it really depends on how you define success and like control. Yeah, well, I think people do, and the movements do try to do a lot of planning and anticipating and analyzing about what things are going to be, but actually often it's the unintended consequences of what happens that becomes an opportunity. And in fact, grabbing opportunities and being creative with mistakes, which we all make all the time. I've been in some like insane situations because we thought we had it sussed that we didn't, but it didn't end up being a failure because we took that moment and we actually used that moment. And that's part of the magic, but it's also about experience and relationship, which I keep saying this, but it's so important that if you trust the people that you're with, that when things don't go according to the plan, you actually use your creativity to find another way through it. And I think these days with social media, like often a failure is often we didn't get in the press. It's like, you know, if a tree falls in the forest and the media doesn't take a picture, did the tree really fall? Well, you know, big debate. But to me, what did we do to maximize that opportunity? You know, and like obviously social media and the amazing skills and technologies at our disposal. The people of West Papua got no freedom and no access to power, but they use their cell phones like no one else. So we know what's going on. And I think that's the thing about maximizing it and recognizing that we can't always control what's going on, but we can always be creative and we can decide. One of the hardest calls in activism is when to go home. When is it time to stop? And I think that's something you should think about in advance, like exit strategy. It's kind of like, you know, it's very easy to lock yourself into a situation with no thought about when to go. And of course, the factors in terms of when to go aren't always, you may not have achieved the goal, but you may have got the people to where the people can be. You may have got the story, the elements of the story. So, and then you can then build on that. So yeah, I think that's the hard part is working out where does this particular thing end. But it doesn't really matter if it's part of a wider campaign that's been properly thought through, because no one thing is usually the game changer. Sometimes, but not always. I hope that's helpful. It's kind of a big question.
Think you've accidentally muted yourself, Catherine, I'm afraid.
Oh my God, I'm back.
Welcome back. Yeah, so there's another question.
It's a very unusual situation for me to ever mute myself. However, this question about how we can make the most of lockdown for a new normal. I was on a webinar last night, which was really inspiring, with Tanya Pulwhare, Sue Bradford, and Ricardo Menendez, talking about climate change, inequality and poverty, and making a new normal. And it was about, you know, the impossible is possible. It is. And so this is a very exciting time to try and help people shift. But one of the things I know is that you have to work with people where they are, not where you think they should be. And it's kind of, after 30 years of neoliberalism, people aren't well educated about change being possible. You know, we've been living with the Tina principle. There is no alternative for a long time. I believe in Pama. There are many alternatives. And I think that now is a time for people to not hardcore attack the government, because that isn't going to be helpful, but to actually think about where are people at with the issues and how can we move them forward to a positive solution that they might be open to that they weren't before. Like when the oil price goes under zero, it's a new world. And so there is an opportunity there to start talking about it. When the guy on TV from Gull petrol station starts saying, oh, this is a good time to talk about renewables, you're like, oh my God, the change is already happening. We just have to be skilled at helping people to make the shift that and try to get to their base values, which have been displayed in some ways during the lockdown, of caring for other people. Like, this country hasn't completely lost the plot, or we wouldn't be where we are. Like, you know, we're not America. So with those base values, and I know I'm as cynical as anybody about, you know, how much people care about fairness, and the attitude towards beneficiaries is disgusting in this country. It's still disgusting, and it's manipulated all the time. But yes, you know, this is that opportunity to say, hey, things can be different and you can be part of it. And localism isn't the total solution, but localism's got a lot to offer, and we can do this stuff together and we can feed people. I mean, I'm involved in a food network in my area. We're just getting excess organic food from people who've got it, and actually moving it out of our valley and giving it to people that need it. And that's not activism. That's just bloody basic as far as I'm concerned. But it's the beginning of maybe the conversation that the middle class needs to have about why we got all the food and they haven't got any. So this is a great moment for starting those conversations and looking at community building, community economic development building, with the criteria and lens of climate change and genuine sustainability. Everything we do, we can put those tests up, and we can say to people, this other shit didn't work. Because if you go right back to what happened, and from what I understand happened with agriculture in China, a whole lot of people have been driven out of agriculture by corporate agriculture, and it's led to some incredibly dire consequences for the world. Cool. I'm just thinking if there's anything else that people want to talk about. It looks like, I don't think, are there any more questions? I'm talking about, we're looking at 10 to 4. If there's no more questions right now, I'll just cover a few more stories, because I've kind of ranted and fitted in quite a bit. But I guess the reason stories are important is that you need to believe that you're not alone, and your generation's not alone, and that we stand on the shoulders of giants, that ancestors, and we all have ancestors, and they're all a mixed bag, God help us, but they are also the pathway forward. And I think part of Western culture's problem is thinking the past, whereas other cultures will say the past is in front of us. And I think that we need to really tell stories and listen to stories so that we can feel inspired by each other and strengthened by each other. I was on 4 Zoom calls yesterday, and they were all amazing. One of them was a project led by Anjum Rahman from the Islamic Women's Council, who is one of the women leaders up, and way before the Christchurch terrorism, she was a leader. And her project is called Aotearoa, Inclusive Aotearoa Collective, and they talk about belonging, and you have these conversations about belonging, and you just see from those conversations just how important people's stories are. There was someone there from Peru. There was a tangata whenua woman who had no access to her whenua. There was a trans person talking about exclusion, and we were all listening to each other, and it was obvious that so many people want change. So many people actually want to hear each other's stories, and if we can just actually even use Zoom to tell some stories to each other, people who I would never have met these women, and they rocked my world, and this trans person, sorry, they rocked my world. And you know, that's the quality relationship from which we can then start talking. Everybody was on the same page about Mother Earth. It was like, hey, we've got to do this. If you look at the Mātiki Mai project by Tangata Whenua project led by Dr. Margaret Motu, Moana Jackson, and the and a large group of rangatahi as well, you'll see in Mātiki Mai that you know, their question was not how can we make a constitution that is watertight, because that's a Westminster Court rule, but their question was about what is the best way to make decisions. And when my friend Veronica Kawhai went into prisons and into units for teenage mums and talked to young people, you know what the young people's priority was? The environment, because we're not separate from it. And we need to acknowledge that what we've done has broken the sacred relationship that we once had with the air, the water, and the earth. That was their top priority. So young people, I have faith in you, and I believe you will inherit from the stories of your elders. You will inherit the energy to do what has to be done. And like, I'm not going to stop. I'm going to be that right there with you for as long as I can breathe. But it's very heartening. And it doesn't mean everybody has to be on board. Change doesn't happen because of majoritarianism. It happens because of inspiration and organizing. Just checking to see if there's any other pātai. I think we're all good for that. I guess it's probably, Abigail, it might be good for me to wrap up soon. I think, because you know, the thing I find hard about Zoom is like, we can't get up and run around the room. So I think I've been a privileged person to be part of movements that have been successful. And I think that, to me, the definition of success is different for different people. I was in a workshop once, and there was a group of tangata whenua talking about their definition of success was, we're still here, you know, because that's what colonization makes you fight for. You just, for your survival, and survival, you know, that is something we need to respect. I guess in Hauraki, where we're still fighting the mining, that would be our definition. We're still here, but not only are we still here, we're seeing seeds of hope everywhere. For example, there's a person in a company in Auckland that are now recycling gold using enzymes out of e-waste. And we don't recycle 99% of our e-waste in Aotearoa. So for us as activists, we want a relationship with that company that's actually extracting that stuff, because if we can start extracting minerals out of e-waste, we don't bloody well have any excuse for digging up the Mother Earth. And so to us, that's a relationship we need to cultivate, because we need the inspiration that it's not going to be another 40 years of having to stand on the road. I mean, we'll do it if we have to, but like, that isn't ideal. We want to build an alternative vision of how we relate to mining. They call it urban mining as opposed to extractive destruction. And, you know, we all need that inspiration as well as that, that sense of kaha, because otherwise we will burn out. Otherwise we'll get too tired. And we need the relationships with the all kinds of groups to work together and be prepared to have coalitions that have hard conversations. One of the reasons I went on the board of Greenpeace and others is the hard conversations that I want to bring to the board. And with love and respect, we've got things to do and things to change to be a better group and to build better quality relationships in Aotearoa. And that's normal. And it's healthy. The only thing that's not normal in groups is to pretend there's no conflict. As soon as you pretend there's no conflict, you're real in trouble. And that's what we need to learn, is to how to have it so that we feel safe enough to have the conflicts over what we're doing and why we're doing it and how we're treating each other. And then we're unstoppable. So I'm looking at the time here. I've got 6 minutes. I don't know if either of Centil or Abigail wants to say something, but I want to say thank you for listening to me. This has been a fairly kind of a bit of a download of my, I didn't put up any slides. I didn't show you any photos of 40 years of, we got 40 years of photos, but I didn't show them. I'm not that kind of organized person. I want us to connect as humans about that quality relationship stuff to keep us going. And I really, really do think that we can use this time to actually inspire each other. But we do have to look for real change and not just, single issue victory. It's not enough. We need to use single issue victory to move us to fundamental change. So kia ora everybody, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. I think I'll hand over to Abigail now to wrap us up, and thank you very much for your patience.
Wonderful.
And stand strong.
Thank you so much, Catherine. That was amazing. And I don't think I'm the only one who shares that sentiment, because I see a lot of people in the chat being like, thank you, that was amazing. That was so inspirational. So beautiful storytelling. And I think a lot of us could sit here and listen to you tell stories for a very long time. If anybody has any questions that they didn't get to ask, or anything that pops up later that you want to ask, there's actually an email address at Greenpeace. It's a get involved email address that Sens will share in the chat, and you can send any questions there, and we'll make sure that we send them on to Catherine so that she can answer them for you. And just a reminder as well that there's the link to the future sessions. So Catherine will be speaking again this Saturday at 4 p.m. And then we've got sessions set up for the coming weeks every Wednesday and Saturday at 4 p.m. So we'll send around the link for that calendar as well. And also in regards to the question around kind of strategies for activism in this space through a COVID lens, there's some future sessions around that too, from a campaigning perspective, from a comms perspective, etc. So stay tuned if you want to hear more about that. And if you have any suggestions as well and feedback, then also please do share that with us, because like I said, this is our first session and we have lots to learn still as to how to make them as good as we possibly can to provide the kind of inspiration and knowledge that you all would like to get at this point in time. So please give us your feedback. Any feedback you have, we welcome it. And so I'd just like to close this, also to say, again, thank you so much, Catherine, and thank you, Sens. Sens has put in heaps of time and energy into making these happen and getting these all set up. So you're amazing. Thank you so much. We're also trying to figure out at Greenpeace how we work in this space when we can't do things out on the streets face-to-face with all of you. Yeah. So it's really great, since we can't see you all face-to-face, to still be able to connect with you all online, because we miss you heaps. So thank you for coming. So yeah, thank you so much for coming, and I'd like to close this with you by acknowledging again all of you who've come here today and have given your time and energy, again, for this shared kaupapa, for supporting each other, because everybody definitely needs the support, especially at this point in time, and to come together in our journey to be better activists, to create that green and peaceful future, and to continue to work together. Look very much forward to working with all of you in the future, and very much look forward to the day when I can see you all face to face again. So kia ora koutou, and see you again soon, I hope.
Kia ora.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
See you Saturday, where I'll make up some completely different shit. Bye.
Awesome. Look forward to it. Cool.
Bye.
Bye.